Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Sapient Thoughts, where we discuss theophilosophical issues, where we refute the arguments of the futile arguments, the weak argument, the specious arguments, the spurious arguments of the detractors of Islam, in addition to making our own arguments for the potency and the veracity and the truthfulness of Islam. Today, inshallah, we're going to be refuting, debunking, confuting, and rejecting a claim that is made by the anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic apologists, which is actually quite a weaker than a spider's web type of claim, which is, they say that the sky or the heaven or the universe is presented in the Islamic cosmology, in the Qur'an in particular, as a solid object. And in order to kind of strengthen their case, refer to two different verses of the Qur'an. One that is mentioned in chapter number 22, verse number 65, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He holds السماوات والأرض أن تقع على الأرض, that He holds the heavens and the earth. وأن يمسك السماء أن تقع على الأرض, that He holds the heaven, that it falls on the earth. And they say, look at this. In order for that to be the case, the heaven has to be a solid object, and therefore the presentation of the Quran is that the heaven is a solid object. And the other verse that they mention is in chapter number 35, verse number 41, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He يمسك السماوات والأرض أن تزولا, that He holds the heavens and the earth, that they would fall out of their place, or they would come out of their place, or that they would be moved out of their place. Zawal, min zawal, yani from the word zala yazilu, means like zawal, something to be moved out of its place, or to move away in general. So these are the two verses that they do istishhad with, or they try and evidence to suggest that the Qur'an's picture, the cosmological picture, is one which is that the heaven or the universe is a solid object. Now, this is false for two reasons, and the second of which I think really is an undercutter, by the way. So I don't want to hear this again. I mean, only an embarrassed person, after hearing the second of 2 or 3 points I'm going to make, would dare to challenge this point. It's just so embarrassing, to be honest. The first point is this. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He refers to something as a whole, He can refer to a part, meaning the whole. And this is part of the kind of phraseological, mereological, terminological usages of the Qur'an. So mereology is the parts of whole and wholes and parts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, in the Qur'an says, He mentions in Surah An-Nuh, chapter 71, يَجَعَلُونَ أَصَابِعَهُم فِي آذَانِهِم وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُم وَأَصَرُّوا وَاسْتَكْبَرُوا اسْتِكْبَارًا. That the people of Noah, that they put their أَصَابِعَهُم فِي آذَانِهِم, that they put their fingers in their ears. Now, really, did they put their entire, look at the size of the finger. You put the entire, it's impossible really to put the entire finger in the ear. So what is intended here is the banan, the enamel, the fingertip, and you put it in the ear. But here you see, the fingertip, which are referred to in Arabic as enamel, this is not يَجْعَلُونَ أَنَامِلَهُم. He didn't say that. He said they put their أَصَابِعَهُم, even though the enamel, the fingertip, is that which is there. Likewise now with this, when Allah says يُمْسِكَ السَّمَاء, it doesn't necessarily have to mean everything in the heaven. It could mean, as Tahir ibn Ashur, he says in his tafsir, that it's referring to certain things like meteor, it's referring to snow, which comes from above and below, it's referring to rain, it's referring to this, referring to that. All of these things that are above us can do suqut al-ard, can, from our anthropological, phenomenological perspective, fall on us. Yes. What's the problem? And this is a linguistically acceptable, for the reasons aforementioned, understanding of the verse. But let's move a little bit further. If really, and this is the undercutter here, so wait for it. If really the Qur'an's picture of the heaven, the Samaء, is that of a solid object, my question to you is this. How could the Prophet Muhammad do Isra al-Ma'raj through a solid object? See how embarrassing that must... I mean, as I say this to you now, how embarrassed do you feel as the anti-Islamic apologists? Very embarrassing, isn't it? And the Qur'an even says, it's mentioned in chapter number 6, verse 125, He even says, He's talking about, وَمَن يُرِدِ اللَّهَ أَن يَضِلَّهُ, whoever Allah wants to misguide, يَجْعَلْ صَدْرَهُ ضَيِّقًا حَرَجًا, He makes his chest constrained, كَأَنَّمَا يَصَعَّدُ فِي السَّمَاءِ, it's as if he is ascending in the heaven. How is this كأنما conceivable if the heaven is a solid object? I rest my case, ladies and gentlemen. Wallahi, I rest it. I rest my case, sorry to say. This should never be heard again now. It's so embarrassing. They are saying that the Quran says that the heaven is a solid object, when one of the most central things in the Prophet's seerah biography is that he done Isra and Ma'raj. He went up the heaven. How can you go up the heaven when it's a solid object? Come on, please. Really. These people do not employ critical reasoning when they're dealing with the Quran. Now, another ishkal that a problematized thing that someone can say is that how come now, if we take it on face value and we're not saying it's a part of the heaven that falls, can we still understand it to mean that the heaven is some kind of the fabric of space is going to implode upon itself, or is going to create a black hole or something like that, and that it would appear to us as if it's falling, if that is the case? Allahu A'lam, God knows best. The kayfiyah, or the howness of how such a thing would take place and how it would look from our perspective if it was in its, for example, initial phases, or if it was in its end phases, is something we cannot speculate on. But we should remember that Allah, when He's speaking to the human being, He is speaking to him in His own anthropocentric phenomenological perspective, and that means from his perspectival is from His perspective. And I rest my case. I don't think there's anything more to be said about this. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.